So I would like to first of all thank everybody for coming in today. This is your DJ Antonio Caesar, also youth program coordinator at Faith in Place. We incorporate a lot of music with our youth, but I'm gonna hand it off to Brian for today's session so that he can introduce the session and workshop for today, and so that we can have all a wonderful time. So screen share is off, and Brian, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Let's give some round of applause via Zoom here for DJ Antonio Caesar. You can see his contact information and follow him at DJ Antonio Caesar. Caesar is very talented leading our youth program at Faith in Place and also brings great music to set the stage for our workshops together. Welcome to our first workshop during our 2020 Green Team Summit. We had a fabulous plenary kickoff last night where we began to connect the dots under this theme of a just recovery as we face the crises of climate change, racism, and COVID-19. How do we as people of faith and conscience courageously face these crises and take measurable action as we go forward? That's what this summit is all about. Our first workshop tonight, we're diving deep into the theme, how climate change impacts our health. Let me just say a word. I see many of you are already chatting. I see people from Deerfield, Illinois, Nebraska, from South Africa. Just welcome to each of you. Definitely, we want to encourage chat engagement tonight. At the Green Team Summit, we're all about connecting with each other, and the chat is one way to do that. I also just want to orient you. We're using the Zoom platform that you all came in through the Chime site that we've set up. On Zoom, if you move your cursor to the very top right, you can either view other participants through gallery view or speaker view, and you can play with that. You can also adjust how big the slide is looking. You see a slide right now that say welcoming words with Reverend Brian Souter. You can make that look bigger by scrolling to the left or the right based on your screen. So make yourself comfortable, get what you need, take stretch breaks, video on or off, all is okay. What we want is for good information to happen tonight and good connection with each other. We do expect you to stay on mute tonight. If you accidentally go off mute, don't worry, we'll put you back on mute. But you do control that so that after we have our presentation this evening and you go into the breakout rooms, you can unmute and talk with each other. And we'll also have a question and answer time where you're welcome to ask questions through the raise hand function. So welcome tonight. Just really excited. We have a couple of other things just to highlight. In the Chime platform, there is a Get Connected tab. And that tab, as you start to get excited about different resources, feel free to put them in the chat for other people to link to. But there's also under the Get Connected tab on the Chime app is resources from Faith in Place and others of our partners, including Interfaith Power and Light, that you can go check out tonight, either during the workshop or after the workshop. I do want to thank you. This Green Team workshop and all of these amazing speakers and the technology is made possible by our sponsors. I want to thank all of our sponsors. Particularly tonight's workshop is sponsored by Gajerio and Tolley. They're a real estate group that for every house that they sell, they give a donation to an environmental justice cause in the community. Shout out to George Tooley, a good friend of Faith in Place. They're sponsoring tonight and very thankful for them. So tonight we get to hear about this theme of how climate change impacts health. Dr. Natasha DeJarnett has been a friend of Faith in Place. This is going to be one workshop where we don't have Dr. Natasha live. She had an emergency, but here's the good news. In-house at Faith in Place, our communications director, Elena Bettis, is a master of public health. She serves on many boards with Dr. Natasha, is an expert herself in this theme of health and climate change. And we also, even though Dr. Natasha had an emergency, we were able to pre-record her presentation. So the way tonight's gonna work is we're gonna watch the pre-recording of Dr. Natasha's presentation, then go into breakout rooms, meet each other, wrestle with the content, then come back for question and answers. And we've asked Elena, as well as our staff person, Reverend Cindy Shepard, to facilitate question and answers and the resources that we have available. So at this time, I want to turn it over to the Inspirational Communications Director of Faith in Place, someone all of you have gotten messages from in your inboxes and through our social media at Faith in Place. At this time, Elena, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brian, and good night to everyone, or good afternoon. I am very excited to be introducing Dr. DeJarnett, and she has been a longtime inspiration for me when I was first going into public health and climate change. She's an expert in air quality and how climate affects air quality and has gotten many awards for her research in that area. Right now, she's serving as the Interim Associate Director for the Program of Partnership Development at the National Environmental Health Association. But she has worked for the American Public Health Association and the National Environmental Health Association over the past decade. So I'm super excited. She's one of my favorite scientists. So to have her be able to share, even if it's pre-recorded today, is an honor. And she is so sad she isn't able to be with us live, but I hope you enjoy this presentation and get a lot out of it. And then when we come back together, we'll be able to break out and discuss what she shared, and I will be able to answer any questions that you have. All right.
Thank you, Elena, and the organizers for the kind invitation. I am honored to have this opportunity to speak at the Faith in Place Virtual Green Team Summit. I want to acknowledge the frontline workers who are working to prevent and mitigate the spread of COVID and the essential workers who put themselves at risk to meet everyone's needs. I also want to acknowledge the global movement to call for justice and equity. For all these reasons, I don't take for granted the opportunity to be here with you today. I am Dr. Natasha DeJarnett, Interim Associate Director of Program and Partnership Development at the National Environmental Health Association. And before I delve into the many ways that climate change harms health, I'd like to share with you a little bit about the National Environmental Health Association, also known as NEHA. Our mission is to advance the environmental health professional with the purpose of providing healthful environments for all. Environmental health professionals make up the second largest segment of the public health workforce, ensuring that we have clean air to breathe, safe water to drink, and are in environments that are free of disease-carrying vectors and pests. We have nearly 7,000 members who are predominantly in the public sector, working at all levels of government, as well as uniformed services and academia and industry. We have a long and successful history of providing education and training, as well as being a resource within the environmental health community. And our members work in many areas that are both directly and indirectly related to climate change. Government Affairs at NEHA advocates on behalf of the environmental health workforce, and NEHA's solution to environmental health challenges like climate change is to invest in a credentialed environmental health workforce. As such, we have helped secure funding for Zika virus research, for CDC's Climate and Health Program, and for the Hurricane Recovery Program from the 2017 storms. We also work to ensure that the voice and expertise of environmental health professionals was reflected in the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act, which was signed into law last year. This puts environmental health professionals at the table to ensure that every community is prepared for disasters, and in the event of disasters, that environmental health is there at the table. With funds from CDC, we've provided support for the climate and health adaptation activities at the Minnesota Department of Health and a tri-county region in Portland, Oregon. This year, we'll be funding 2 additional health departments that are approaching climate and health adaptation from a health and all policies framework. With funding from ECO in America, this has allowed us to inform policy. We developed a report on climate change and emergency preparedness, highlighting the environmental health role. With the ECO America, we published 3 years of the American Climate Metrics Survey, which was conducted on our membership. ECO America also hosted a climate and health ambassador training at our annual educational conference for the past 2 years. In addition, I'm really excited to share with you that our board unanimously declared that by 2030, NEHA will be 100% clean energy. Lastly, our members are engaged in climate and health. We have a climate and health program committee, and with this committee, we have drafted and submitted to our board a policy statement on climate change, and also have another one that has been submitted on clean energy. So, how did I get here? I was recently asked that question, and what led me on this path goes back to my childhood. I am a child of the Great Migration, meaning that my parents grew up in the Jim Crow South and moved to points north where there was more opportunity. So my parents are from Birmingham, Alabama. I grew up in Kentucky. So people in the Great Migration had to work really hard to keep strong connections with the family back down south. That meant calling and visiting as often as possible. And also that meant that making sure your children have very strong bonds with the family back home. So I spent a lot of summers and school breaks in Birmingham, Alabama with my family. And it was the best of times. I got to play with my cousins. Here they are in these photos. If you're wondering who I am wearing a blue tie in one photo and a red plaid dress in the other, looking at the camera in neither photo. We had so much fun running, playing with not a care in the world. But actually, I had a care. I noticed at an early age that when I would visit Birmingham, my very well-controlled asthma at home would often flare up when I would visit my family there. And I noticed I began to pack more asthma medication just to have visits there. And this stuck with me through my life, and I wondered why. So when I got into graduate school, I had an opportunity to do a community assessment on any community in the US. And I decided to say, why can't I breathe when I go to Birmingham? So I selected the North Birmingham community that was home to my family. So what I found out was that North Birmingham was a community where my parents grew up in that was home to numerous environmental hazards. When my grandparents purchased their homes, housing options in Birmingham were subject to redlining, meaning people of certain races could only live in certain areas. So it wasn't a choice. They didn't have a choice on what their family would be exposed to. Furthermore, I found out that today, present day, the community continues to have numerous health disparities. So long story short, the place where my family was raised is home to numerous environmental injustices, and there are health impacts that are still present today because of that. This inspired me. This gave me a reason in environmental health to be a voice for the voiceless, and to not only be a voice, but to give space for the voice of the voiceless. So this has stuck with me and lasted with me and really given me my reason behind what I do. So looking at where we are right now in the midst of everything, I think Dr. Jalon White Newsom really explains very well the concurrent emergencies that we're facing between climate change and COVID-19. She shared that across the US, climate change and COVID-19 are playing out in tandem. The warming planet drives increasingly extreme weather, compounding the pandemic's impacts and complicating disaster response. At the same time, these dual threats have exposed profound inequities that divide and weaken us. With that, I want to share with you some of the health disparities that have been uncovered in COVID-19. You can see that African Americans, Latinx, Native Americans have higher mortality, the same with older adults, lower income communities, and those with chronic illnesses that include heart disease and diabetes. CDC also has provided some statistics on the rates of hospitalization rates, and they're highest among American Indians and Alaska Natives, followed by African Americans, Hispanics, or Latinx. Also non-Asian Asian or Pacific Islanders. And then the lowest hospitalization rates are among Caucasians here in the US. I share that with you to show you that the same populations that are most susceptible to COVID-19 are also most susceptible to climate change. We're all at risk to the health threats of climate change, and I'll show you how vast these are as we go through this presentation. But there are some groups that are more susceptible to these health threats, and climate change can actually be a threat multiplier for these listed here today. Children, the World Health Organization reports that 85% of the burden of climate change falls on children younger than 5 years old. That is a generational injustice. Older adults are more likely to have these pre-existing health conditions, which render them more susceptible. In addition, they're more likely to be socially isolated, also leaving them more susceptible when there is an extreme weather event, for example. Impoverished communities and communities of color are more likely to live along the fence lines of industrial polluters, leaving them more exposed and also having higher health disparities. Indigenous communities have close ties to the land. They have close ties to religious practices connected to the land and social practices connected to the land. And climate change is displacing them from these lands, causing it to be challenging to pass on these traditions to the next generations. People with a disability bear higher susceptibility because they may not be as easily able to relocate in the time of an extreme weather event. In addition, undocumented residents may not feel comfortable seeking safety in a storm shelter for fear of deportation. Similarly, LGBTQ populations also may be uncomfortable with storm shelters for fear of being discriminated against or worse. So what I want to share with you is that if we can't meaningfully address climate change without addressing justice. Justice has to be at the center of our actions to advance climate action. If not, these groups will be left behind and not all will benefit from climate action. As such, I'm going to step through several of these different ways that climate change impacts health. We'll start with air quality. We all deserve clean air to breathe, and climate change is decreasing the quality of the air that we breathe. In addition, it's increasing carbon dioxide levels in the atmosphere, and this is trapping heat and pollutants below, much like a blanket traps heat. So air pollution decreases our air quality. Also, this extra trapped heat reduces our air quality. Climate change promotes drought conditions, which can create environments that are conducive to wildfires. And the smoke from these wildfires is also destructive to our health. In addition, the warmer temperatures that we have are resulting in a longer pollen season, and research suggests that the increased carbon dioxide in the atmosphere also increases the intensity of pollen. So what we have is a longer and more intense pollen season. Bad news for allergy sufferers. In addition, we have drought on one hand, we also have more flooding on the other hand, leaving behind mold in our homes and businesses, workplaces, and places of worship. So we also have another exposure in mold that also can decrease air quality. So these decreases in air quality increase our risk of asthma, heart disease, and allergies. And these aren't just nuisances. These can cause us to miss school and miss work, or worse. Taking a snapshot in Illinois, looking at asthma, there doesn't appear to be a significant disparity between adults and children in terms of who has asthma. But if you look at African American children, you can see that the rates are much higher of asthma in African American children in Illinois. Also, this year, the American Lung Association published the State of the Air report. And in this year's State of the Air report, the Chicago metropolitan area was ranked the 16th most polluted city in the nation for ozone and 20th for year-round particle pollution. So air pollution continues to be a challenge, especially in this part of Illinois. And we can see how African American children are disproportionately affected by asthma. Also, I'd be remiss if we didn't take some time to explore the relationship between COVID-19 and air pollution. Research from Dr. Francesca Dominici and others from Harvard University suggests that a 1 unit increase in fine particulate matter is associated with an 8% increase in COVID-19 mortality, meaning that more polluted cities have higher COVID mortality rates. In addition, Brent and others also laid out a case for further investigation between the relationship of air pollution to COVID-19 mortality and disparities by race across the US. So I want to share with you some of what people are doing to adapt when it comes to air quality. My colleagues at University of Louisville have partnered with the Nature Conservancy to launch the Green Heart Study. So what they're doing is they're looking at heart disease risk before planting trees and looking at heart disease indicators afterwards. What they found thus far is that planting the trees does decrease pollution in the environment. And they also have found that the trees or vegetation are associated with decreased cardiovascular disease indicators. Other things that are happening in the environmental health workforce definitely include testing air quality, disseminating alerts, and enforcing air quality regulations. In terms of extreme heat, heat is the top cause of weather-related death in the US. And climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of heat waves, making this a grave concern. Heat-related illness, including heat exhaustion and heat stroke, can be quite challenging, and heat stroke is actually deadly if not treated very quickly. Heart disease and respiratory diseases also are exacerbated by extreme heat, as I pointed out before. So the public health consequences of extreme heat are severe. You can see here in terms of populations in the US that are most susceptible, American Indians and Alaska Natives actually have the highest percent of death rate related to extreme heat exposure. Also, I want to point out another disparity among who is affected most by extreme heat in the US. This study that was published in the American Journal of Public Health uncovered differences in heat-related mortality by citizenship status, finding that 96% of the heat-related deaths from 2005 through 2014 were non-US citizens compared to 4% US citizens. So that's a pretty significant disparity. In addition, they found that there were 3 states in particular where this accounted for 95% of the non-US citizens' deaths. That was in California, Arizona, and Texas. So what are people doing to address extreme heat? Planting trees also affects heat exposure. So that is something that people are doing across the globe. Very similar to air pollution, you actually can combat heat and pollution by increasing vegetation. But also people are changing the way that buildings are being built and utilizing cool roofs to reflect the sun's energy rather than trap the sun's energy. Other things that are happening in the environmental health workforce include education, disseminating the alerts, and ensuring access to cooling centers. Extreme weather is something that is right in the forefront of the minds of many right now, where people are actively recovering from Hurricane Laura as we speak. These photos here are from Hurricane Harvey, and I wanted to show you some of the younger victims of the hurricane to point out that children are at great risk because they are dependent on adults to make decisions in their best interest. In addition, I want to also point out here that extreme weather certainly increases our risk of physical injury and death, but it also has a heavy toll on our mental health, which I'll revisit later in this presentation. Just wanted to show a snapshot of Hurricane Harvey. Hurricane Harvey displaced over 30,000 people. There were at least 63 deaths reported. There was infrastructure damage, and this can cause us to not be able to access needed services like health services in a time where we may need them most. And then there was water contamination. Some of the industrial facilities that were there were flooded, leaving contaminated waters for our communities. So people reported increased gastrointestinal illness and skin rashes. What are people doing about extreme weather or being prepared for extreme storms and hurricanes? Well, ensuring access to storm shelters, ensuring that people get the notifications early so that the alerts are disseminated widely, and that people actually have access to be able to evacuate, because evacuating does save lives. And so we have extremes on both hands when it comes to precipitation. Flooding on one hand, and with flooding, this can cause our water to be contaminated, causing stormwater to untreated sewage water to contaminate our drinking water supply, increasing our risk of gastrointestinal illness. This also causes destruction to our communities and infrastructure, that can result in injury and death. In addition, we have drought on the other hand. Drought can decrease crop yield, so it can have a heavy agricultural toll, and that can contribute to malnutrition and wildfires, as we're also seeing play out as we speak across the West. Wildfires, the smoke from those can increase the risk of heart disease and asthma. I wanted to share with you a little bit of what's happening in Illinois. Flooding that damaged infrastructure in Quincy in 2008. And it's been reported that there are decreased agricultural yields that are connected with the climate taking place throughout the state, which agriculture is an important industry in the state. What are people doing globally? They're changing agricultural practices, engaging in crop diversification, soil and water conservation, and other factors all across the globe. And environmental health professionals contribute by assessing soil and water quality and also issuing and ensuring dissemination of water quality advisories. Lastly, climate change increases the amount and geographic distribution of disease-carrying vectors that include mosquitoes and ticks. This is resulting in increases in Lyme disease, West Nile virus, and Zika virus across the US. And here you can see Zika virus cases increasing across the US and also changing in terms of their geographic distribution from 2010 through 2013. So what is the field doing? The field engages in a One Health approach that not only assesses human health, but also takes animal health and the environmental sciences into informing the decision-making to ensure health for all. Other things that the workforce does include education, vector control, and also looking to control areas that attract mosquitoes, like standing water, for example, eradicating areas of standing water. So climate change not only threatens our physical health, but our mental health as well. Exposure to extreme weather and floods can increase risk of stress, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, and depression. Nearly half, 49% of Hurricane Katrina survivors developed a mood or anxiety disorder, and 1 in 6 develop PTSD. Extreme heat can also increase risk of depression, violence, suicidal ideation, and suicide. Extreme heat can also render inactive some psychotropic medications. Also, internationally, drought and extreme heat can also cause conflict between nations. So with that, I want to share with you a story that had a great impact on me. In 2017, APHA launched the Year of Climate Change and Health. But in 2016, leading up to it and planning, we paused and had a question. Once the 2016 election occurred, we said, do we want the first thing that we do in this new administration to be this Year of Climate Change and Health with an administration that has acknowledged that climate is not a priority? And I'll never forget Dr. Georges Benjamin, who's photographed here wearing the gray suit. He said that, quoting Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, it's always the right time to do what's right. And it is always the right time to do what's right. I want to leave you with those wise words of inspiration. Here we are photographed with Vice President Al Gore. And this is a result of the Year of Climate Change and Health. And the year drew over 60 partners. It drew activities each month that helped increase awareness of climate change as a grave health concern. So with that, I want to remind you, it's always the right time to do what's right. Be empowered in what you're doing. We need it. It's not always popular, and it can be quite heavy at times, but what we're doing will make a difference and protect health of many. I am pleased to share with you my contact information, and don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
So thank you to Natasha virtually. I hope you all enjoyed that presentation and learned a lot. I definitely learned something every time I hear her speak. And so this breakout room is brought to us from the Environmental Law and Policy Center. So we're very grateful for their sponsorship and for supporting the next little bit as we discuss together what we heard and how we can apply it to our own community. So I have here some breakout room discussion questions. And so what I'm going to do is chat over a link. And if you, before you break out into groups, can click the link, the prompts are available there so you can refer to them as you're discussing. So the questions are, how has your community already experienced health impacts from climate change? Of the health impacts presented, which is of the highest concern for you? And what are some ways you can prepare for and address the ways climate change impacts health in your community? So what we're going to do is we are going to be broken out into groups. If you can take one, two, or all three of these questions and discuss them together. And then pick one person in your group who, when we all come back together, is willing to share one highlight from what you discussed. Then we can all hear a little bit about what's happening across the nation. So I hope that was engaging and you're able to share with your group maybe what's happening in your own community. So now Cindy Shepard and I are going to be tag teaming. We can answer questions. If you have a highlight you would like to share from your breakout group, feel free to do that now. And I believe you should have an ask a question button in the participant window, or you can just raise your hand in your video, and either Cindy or I will share your question if it's typed out in the chat, or you're more than welcome to unmute yourself and share out loud. So does anyone have anything right off the bat? And we will just look for either your raised hand in the video or if you have a chat. So I see a week or so ago, it was 120 degrees in Chino, California, and just 30 miles from downtown LA. Can humans actually survive that? And if they don't have air conditioning, and for how long? Like, the general rule of thumb is over 110, it's very dangerous for humans. There's not like a specific temperature when all of a sudden, no one can live. There's a lot of factors that go into it, depending on if you have any pre-existing conditions, your age, also what activity you're doing. So for those that have occupations that are outside, there's a lot more heat stress associated with that. And so the temperature at which they can survive and continue working is a lot lower. But pretty much over 110, you begin to experience a lot of heat-related effects, such as heat stroke, hyperthermia, or overheating. You can have where your brain starts to shut down slowly, and so that can cause death from exposure fairly rapidly at such high temperatures, making air conditioning really critical for survival. Is climate change directly responsible for the fires in California, Oregon, and Washington, as well as the hurricanes now coming frequently in the southern part of the United States? So what makes it a little bit difficult to explain or connect the dots with is that climate change, you can't necessarily be like, this storm is because of climate change, but there's global trends that are increasing extreme storms. So for example, the wildfires on the West Coast right now, there's hotter temperatures in Oregon, Washington, and California, but then also it's getting complicated because there's also very cold temperatures in Colorado, and it's going over the mountain range and causing there to be even more, it's like blowing air on the fires basically, which are causing them to be even stronger. And so when you have that type of weather pattern, basically that kind of the cold air coming into warm air is causing more frequent storms as well as stronger storms, which is also what's happening with hurricanes. Not only are they more frequent, but you're seeing the severity of the storms being stronger. So that puts definitely human health at higher risk. All right, so.
We had quite a bit of discussion about the wildfires. Some people here are living in that area. Can you talk a little bit about what people can do, what the health effects are and how those can be mitigated?
Sure. So wildfires have basically direct and indirect impacts on human health. So I think as of today, I read that 35 people had died. So mortality is obviously one of the worst direct impacts. And then there's also impacts on air quality, which I'm sure everyone that's joining us from that coast is experiencing right now. So you have what's called PM 2.5 or particulate matter, which gets into the lungs, and it can not only exacerbate existing conditions like asthma or COPD, but it can also, if you're exposed to it for a long period of time, increase your rate of developing these chronic respiratory diseases. So there's the respiratory conditions and mortality, like direct impacts from exposure to fire. And then there's also a lot of secondary health impacts, such as the mental health impacts of losing your home, not being sure, if your family is safe. If you have to go into a shelter, there's a lot of justice issues associated with that, and people not feeling safe in shelters or not having access to shelters. There's also food access issues as the systems are being disrupted throughout the West Coast, and access to food in communities that already have access issues can become, even more difficult. So there's a lot of kind of secondary impacts in addition to that direct air quality impact, as well as those that are being directly in the line of the fires.
Regarding the first question regarding that, as far as the temperature goes, almost more important than the actual temperature itself is the amount of moisture in the air. They measure that, called the wet bulb temperature. And so it affects the ability of a human being to be able to cool themselves off. And one of the hallmarks of climate change is that as the atmosphere warms, it's able to hold more moisture. And so there's certain areas of the world where, as the moisture increases, that impact is going to be severe. And so it's a combination of both temperature and also the humidity in the air, the amount of moisture. So just to add one more point.
Thank you so much, John.
When we learn about climate change, there's a lot of statistics that are the primary sources for us to learn about climate change and what's going on in the world. But it seems that statistics doesn't work and doesn't achieve, and people don't receive the message in their hearts from numbers. So what are some other ways to address climate change apart from statistics?
Thank you, DJ Caesar, for setting up my career choice. So I actually went into climate communications for that exact reason. So I was working more on the science side and studying asthma and a bunch of statistics. And then I realized that it wasn't being communicated, and the impacts and the resources weren't being connected with the communities. So there's a lot of tactics, but I think storytelling and connecting, which is the strength that we have as green teams and as people of faith. I think a lot of us are very natural storytellers, and being able to use that skill to share about climate change and how it's impacting our own stories is a really compelling way to talk about it. My good friend Laura, Reverend Laura Kikweba, is leading a workshop later this week called Migration Stories, and sharing about how to tell stories and how we can use that as one way to build climate resilience. So if you're interested in that, I would recommend attending her workshop.
I was wondering about questions about how communities of faith might respond to help mitigate the mental health issues that arise with climate change.
So when we have communities that are really invested and tight-knit, it's in that one-on-one connection where you're able to check in on people. So a lot of climate sensitivity or vulnerability comes from people being isolated or not able to access the resources they need to respond to extreme storms, extreme heat, the lack of access to food. And so as faith communities are able to draw together to not only care for the people, within the walls of their community, but for the broader community, and be very much in tune with what's going on, that innately builds resilience. I know we have been working with supporting food access during COVID-19 with a lot of faith communities across Illinois. And they were able to respond immediately to the food needs of their communities. And so it's that kind of quick, on the ground attunement with what's happening and what kind of response is needed, where faith communities can really step up and help. So I think knowing that you have a whole group of people that will care for you, even when you're sensitive or vulnerable to, an upcoming heat wave, definitely improves mental health.
That one of the fellows that spoke in our breakout was from Nigeria, and his name is Mohammed. He talked about how in his location, almost everybody there is experiencing malaria because of because of the increased temperature, increasing the number of mosquitoes, and also that it's causing a lot of contaminated water. So it's really exciting to hear somebody from a long way away talk about the things that they were facing.
That's awesome. Hello, hello, and welcome from Nigeria. Thank you for sharing, Holly. All right, so we are about out of time. There are so many great questions and comments in the chat. So if you have a minute to read through those, I wish I could read them all right now, but I will have to turn it over to Reverend Brian Souter, who will be concluding this workshop. So let me
Elena,
turn it over.
a quick comment. If people want to save the chat, if you go down to the file, near file, and click on the 3 dots, and you can save the chat.
Perfect. Thank you, Deb.
Mm-hmm.
Learning new things every day. All right, turning it over to Brian now.
Well, thank you, Elena. Thank you to Dr. Natasha for setting up the content this evening. And thank you to all of you for your active participation. You know, I just want to pastorally just take a moment to invite you all to breathe. You know, feel the breath come into your belly. You just experienced a lot of information, some challenging information. You met people from all across the world. And to breathe, and I want to invite you, as I give a few closing comments and housekeeping items, you know, take out a pen and write down what is the one thing you really want to take away from this workshop as you begin to connect the dots between climate change and health. What is it that you're taking away? What is it that you want to take back to your faith community, to your neighborhood, to your friends and family to apply? Because we can often get lost in the facts and details, and we want to inspire one another to continue to take action. So please continue to journal and write that down. I do want to preview to you, we have more. There is more good workshops coming your way. We're going to take a half-hour break here, and then we're coming back with Dr. Jalise Rahman, who is going to give us more information about COVID-19 under this theme of a just recovery. And then later tonight at 7:30, Jackie Patterson with the NAACP is going to be talking about facing our climate crisis and lifting up a theme of environmental justice. And I saw a question about local food and climate change tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Monica Brown Moss, First Lady with Pastor Otis Moss III at Trinity United Church of Christ, is going to be talking about a local food economy. And then following that, we'll have Ryan Wilson and Tracy Williams from the Metropolitan Planning Council here in Chicago really talk about the health and economic impacts of flooding in Illinois. And this will apply to global impacts of flooding as well, as we continue to lift up this theme of what we can do to advance a just recovery together as a community. We have back at the Chime site, we have something for you. It's called an exit survey. You can fill out this survey when you attend your last session. Maybe tonight is your last session. Hopefully you're coming back to many of the sessions that you're going to attend. But when you attend the last one, we want to hear from you. So be sure to fill out that exit survey. We're going to enter everybody who enters exit survey into drawings. Many people have donated to us some fabulous prizes. This includes a sustainable apparel from United by Blue, information and environmental books, fair trade fans, Faith in Place t-shirts, and more. So be sure to fill out that exit survey before you leave your last session here at the Green Team Summit. And also a lot of great information was shared tonight back at the website, either faithinplace.org, greenteamsummit.org, or the Chime platform that has the agenda. You can find recordings. They'll be made available coming up in a week's time. So you can always log back into this website, watch recordings of workshops that you attended and want to get the information again, or maybe you missed a workshop and you want to watch the recording from that workshop. Of course, attending in person gets you the opportunity to network and to meet people from all over the globe that are with us in this cause. At this time, you can text GTS 2020 44321 to give. This event is free for all who attend. It does cost us significant money, so we're thankful. If you can, please consider making a donation to help support covering the cost for this amazing event. Partner by donating. You can text to give. You can go to our websites and donate online. You can send in checks. All of that is available. So we are at time. I want to thank you again for joining us. Follow us at Faith in Place on the social media apps. And at this time, I'm going to turn it back over to our DJ, Antonio Caesar, to play us out as we prepare for the next workshop. DJ Antonio Caesar, the floor is yours.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so thank you everybody for coming. And we are having our new DJ set come up so that you can walk out of this virtual room happy. And by the way, this track that I'm about to play, our youth program, one of our youth made this track, and please enjoy.
Thank you, COVID-19. For 55 days in Cali, people stopped moving and the sea was free. Free, just as all of humanity longs to be from COVID-19. When I look down into the sea, all I see is me, and I think I would really hate to be the sea. It's always polluted, dirty, and unclean. The creatures it holds are hurt. The underwater habitats are being burned, and in return, very few have begun to learn. Before the virus, I was wild. I could run and jump, laugh and cry, spread my wings and forever fly. Before us, the sea could sit still or create mountainous waves. It could stay cool and clear without sea life having to fear. But now, like us, the sea is trapped and the vaccine is nowhere near. What is always known but never remembered is that everything we put into the sea.
Thank you everybody for coming to the Green
Especially things unseen.
Workshop #1.
Our bodies are 60% water. How much of it is clean?
Really great to get your feedback.
Animals and plants we eat. What's in the water we feed?
Learn more about
The
your
water we
experiences.
swim in. What chemicals are not only touching, but being absorbed by our skin? With everything that goes in us, what are we leaving for our kin?
Your solutions. What are we leaving for our kin?
I want an
That's what
ocean
we're
for
gonna
me.
start
Not just for 55 days, not just for 7 weeks, but I want it free for all eternity. I'll find a tree with the power to heal through the sap it leaks, a tree that flows of hope for the sea, to allow all its inhabitants to breathe freely, that allows the breeze from the ocean top to smell fresh and chilly, that allows the sea to forever be wild and pollution free. I will guard this tree from the cruel, polluted hands of humanity. Until then, I encourage you to go green. As much as we take from the sea, there should be no question. We must keep it clean. Just as when you steal, there are consequences.